They've trained every day for these moments, swimming countless laps, each with personal goals and dreams of excellence. And now it comes to this. A starting block, an empty lane, a series of commands, and one official responsible for a fair start before the race begins. In every sport, an official's role is best conducted behind the scenes, enforcing rules and procedures without distracting from the competition at hand. For starters, it isn't so simple. At the beginning of every race, they are in the spotlight. However, by understanding the techniques necessary for the best possible send-off each time, every starter can be the ideal official, off-stage, efficient, and devoted to a well-run competition. This video will examine the philosophy and protocol followed at every USA swimming competition, from age group meets all the way to the Olympic trials. Whether you are seeking initial certification as a starter or simply looking to sharpen your skills, these next few minutes will provide the keys to the art. We'll divide the discussion into 4 distinct sections, beginning with the basics, the philosophy of starting. Then we'll move into the preparation, those pre-meet essentials involving equipment and fellow officials. Next, we'll follow the procedures, the commands and expectations leading up to the start itself, as well as the steps necessary in handling false starts. And finally, the moment of truth, the start itself. When swimmers react to a simple beep and leave their mark in pursuit of all that they've trained for, we'll present some case studies and examine potential situations that every starter will most likely encounter. But first, our philosophy.
I think a good starter is somebody who's experienced, who's confident, and who is in control of the start.
A good starter has a nice loud voice and sets you off at a good time, doesn't hesitate too long or go too quickly or catch you off guard.
I think there are several things that a good starter needs to have when he's doing starting for the meets. First, he must be consistent in his commands. I think that really helps the athletes prepare. He must be calm in his commands. The tone of his voice is one that will really dictate the emotions of the athletes when they're up on the blocks. And I think finally he must have command of the field. It's important that the field listens to him, that they respond accordingly at the time they should, so that all athletes can get a fair start.
I think what makes a good starting official is one obviously with integrity. The start is a critical place of the race and a critical point in the race where everything starts. The momentum of the race, and certainly an official has to be totally focused, just as the athlete has to be focused on the start, the official has to be focused on that as well.
A good starter is someone who talks clearly and loud and doesn't hold you too long at your mark, but also doesn't start you too quickly.
The paramount responsibility of every starter is to ensure that every swimmer receives a fair start. Athletes and coaches all agree. Every competitor deserves the chance to be on equal footing when the race begins. Now, of course, what happens after that depends on the swimmer. A fair start is the product of a specific set of starting rules. In practice, these steps last for no more than a few seconds. In that narrow time frame, a starter must follow established protocol. Now, while the duties can be memorized easily, only experience can make this process second nature. Remember, a starter's sole purpose is to assure a fair start for every competitor. This is not a time for grandstanding or displays of authority. While every official would love to be poolside at the start of an Olympic final, starters, like swimmers, must move through the ranks and experience every level of competition. And as veteran officials can attest, the concerns at the age group level are often very different from those at elite competitions. Only after starting a spectrum of ages and abilities will a starter become proficient. But even after rising to world-class meets, the best starters are the ones that continue to work at every level of competition. And even the best will invariably make mistakes. Chief among them, a lack of patience. Never forget that there are bundles of nerves hovering over every platform, and that sometimes swimmers may take longer than others in getting set. Experienced starters read the body language of every swimmer in the heat, and patience produces fairness. Starters must accept responsibility, admit mistakes when made, and stay focused on the present. Dwelling on past miscues will only result in future mistakes in later heats. Regardless of the situation, starters are expected to remain professional at all times. Swim meets are often times of considerable stress for athletes, coaches, and parents, and a calm, level-headed demeanor is essential. Lastly, remember to be a team player. Every competition requires a team of officials, each with a specific and equally important task. There is no hierarchy. Referees, stroke and turn judges, and starters all must work together in order to produce a well-run meet, something every participant always notices and appreciates. By keeping these philosophies in mind, you'll have the groundwork for a fair start every time. Up next, we'll move on to the pregame necessities as we observe how a starter should prepare for each meet. For swimmers, the key to a successful meet is preparation. The same is true for officials. While grueling workouts aren't required, a starter's preparation must begin well before the day of the meet. This includes a review of the rules, studying the schedule of events, and working with a meet referee to establish protocol and procedures. Oftentimes, the meet referee may delegate tasks to the head starter. These may include pairing deck assignments and establishing the starter's rotation. Thus, advanced planning and leadership abilities are a must. Before the meet begins, the starter must become familiar with the competition site and, of course, determine the location of the starting area. The starter shall stand within 10 feet of the starting end of the pool, free from any obstructions that may hinder their view of the swimmers. This position should be coordinated with the referee, with the starter determining their preferred position first, and the referee adjusting himself accordingly. Before the first race, it is the starter's responsibility to examine each platform for stability. Remember, a loose starting platform not only jeopardizes the official's responsibility of providing a safe environment for the competition, but also jeopardizes the starter's main objective: fair starts for every competitor. Now note, if the lane numbers are not visible from the starter station, numbered identifier cones are recommended behind each platform. This way, in the event of a false start or no-show, officials may easily identify the correct lane number. If a recall rope is used, its location and operation must be tested, and in the event of a recall, it must be able to safely halt the race as quickly as possible. Next and most important, the starter must familiarize himself with the equipment. Currently, electronic horn starts are the most common system used today. At least 30 minutes before the start of the first race, a starter is expected to test this equipment and address any necessary repairs or modifications. Then the microphone recall button must be tested. The starter should also assure that a backup microphone is readily available. In order to deliver a fair start to every competitor, the starter must be clearly audible to each swimmer. Thus, volume must be tested and adjusted before the start of the meet. Also, the strobe light signal must be positioned so that it is visible to all swimmers and timers. Finally, some additional equipment that may be needed at the starter station: warning bells for final laps of distance events, lap counters, recording forms for false starts, etc. Clearly, all starting equipment must be tested prior to the start of any competition, and every starter should be encouraged to conduct a final dress rehearsal just before the meet begins. This includes all backup timing systems as well, confirming that all lane timers are familiar and comfortable with their stopwatches. Frequently at age group meets, parent volunteers are using these watches for the first time. A quick pre-meet instruction will help the competition run smoothly for everyone involved. Simulated starts and timing instructions should not take more than a few minutes and can be performed after warm-ups are concluded, minutes before the first heat of the morning. Keep it simple and direct using the following guidelines. Inform them that a simulated start check is necessary before the race begins. Locate the strobe for all timers. This is where they must focus on every start. Remind timers that watches must start on the strobe, not on the sound, as the speed of light moves much faster than sound. Conduct race commands.
Take your mark.
In the exact manner you will in an actual race. Let the clock and watches run for approximately 20 to 30 seconds. Use this period for any additional information that may be required. This may include notifying the head timer of malfunctioning watches or mistakes made on the start. During this period, the starter also must remind timers to operate only one watch and/or one button at once. When the test time has elapsed, instruct all timers to lean over the edge and anticipate a finish. Count down from 3 and ask each timer to stop the watch and push the backup button at the sound. Once all watches and systems have been checked, synchronize all timing equipment with the head timer. Verify that all watches are exact and reset the timing system accordingly. Then simply ask all timers to be seated, and the first heat is ready to go. Now, with preparations in place, it's time to focus on the starting procedure. At the commencement of each heat, the referee shall signal to the swimmers by a short series of whistles to remove all clothing except for swimwear, followed by a long whistle indicating that they should take and maintain their positions on the starting platform, the deck, or in the water. In backstroke and medley relay events, at the referee's first long whistle, the swimmer shall immediately enter the water, and at the second long whistle, shall return without undue delay to the starting position. When the swimmers and officials are ready, the referee shall signal with an outstretched arm to the starter that the swimmers are under the starter's control. On the starter's command, take your mark, the swimmer shall immediately assume their starting position in the forward start with at least 1 foot at the front of the starting platform or on the deck. Swimmers starting in the water must have at least one hand in contact with the wall or starting platform. When all swimmers are stationary, the starter shall give the starting signal. When a swimmer does not respond promptly to the command, take your mark, the starter shall immediately release all swimmers with the command, stand up, upon which the swimmers may stand up or step off the blocks. Now, about the take your mark command. After the referee has extended their arm, pause and then give the command in a conversational tone and manner. A flat or slight drop in the pitch of your voice is all that is needed. It should be natural and conversational, not mechanical. You should try to talk the swimmers down with your voice. Remember, be conversational. Don't speed up the command. Similarly, the stand command should be given in a calm, soft voice at a volume lower than the take your mark command. There are a wide variety of scenarios that may occur during the start, from the moment the referee turns over the heat to the starter until the race begins. This section will be broken down into 4 headings: equipment problems, distractions during a start, response to the command, and starting position. Part 1, equipment problems. There are 5 common occurrences that may prevent a starter from conducting a clean start. First, the microphone is not working. In this situation, the starter must ask the swimmers to stand until reception is restored. If the problem cannot be fixed immediately, the swimmers may be asked to relax or to step down. Once the problem is rectified, it is the referee's responsibility to begin the starting sequence again by extending their arm or by blowing the long whistle if the field is stepped down. Second, the microphone cuts off as the starter is announcing, "Take your mark." The same procedure must be followed as in the first case. Next, there are times when the horn does not sound when the start button is depressed. In these situations, swimmers must once again be asked to step down until the problem is corrected. Then the start sequence must be repeated. Similarly, there are times when inadvertent or extraneous events might occur, such as the start button being depressed, but a clear click sounds rather than the horn. Swimmers should be asked to step down while the situation is dealt with. However, starters must be mindful that this sound can often trigger a start from competitors. Should this occur, a recall must be sounded with no false start charged to the field. Once again, it is the referee's responsibility to begin the starting sequence with the long whistle. Lastly, there are times when the starting horn emits a double beep. If this occurs and there is no sign of a reaction, then the race may proceed accordingly. However, if even one swimmer appears affected by the double beep, then the race should be recalled and restarted. Part 2, distractions during the start. Every swimmer, coach, and spectator would love a smooth pre-race scenario. Unfortunately, distractions will occasionally occur, particularly at the age group level when literally hundreds of young athletes must arrive at their assigned lanes at the proper time. Everyone who has ever attended an age group meet has witnessed the late rush of a swimmer who is about to miss his race. In these instances, the starter must ask the other swimmers in the heat to stand down while the referee handles the situation accordingly. Also common at all levels are noises or flashes that disrupt the start. This may include last-second cheers from teammates in the stands or an announcer inadvertently speaking at the start. Either way, the starter must ask the swimmers to stand down while the distraction is addressed. If the noise or flash occurs simultaneously with the starting signal, swimmers may be recalled and the starting sequence repeated by the referee and starter. And of course, there are always unforeseen factors that may disrupt a start as well. Whether it is a starting platform or lane line malfunction, or swift changes in the weather, it is the starter's responsibility in concert with the referee to ask swimmers to stand down until the problem is addressed. Successful starters instinctively react to unforeseen
Take
problems,
a look, something's in the pool.
inform the referee, and halt the competition when directed to by the referee until conditions are improved.
Good eyes by the judges there, Rowdy, to notice that.
Part 3 in our discussion of the start involves the response to the command. There are times when one or more swimmers fail to react to the command, "Take your mark." While this could mean that the swimmer is simply in his preferred starting position, it is also possible that the command was not heard. In either case, the starter should ask the heat to stand, pause to let the swimmers get readjusted, and then repeat the command. There are also instances when swimmers do not move at least 1 foot to the front of the platform on command. Current rules dictate that competitors must have at least 1 foot at the front of the platform before the starting signal is given. Once again, the starter should ask the heat to stand and then repeat the "Take your mark" command. If the problem persists, swimmers should be asked to step down and the referee should inform the offending swimmers of the requirement before blowing the long whistle and repeating the starting sequence. In backstroke events, starters must watch for swimmers who place their toes over the lip of the gutter or timing pad. Should a starter witness toes curled over the top, the starter should warn the swimmer of the infraction. Example, lane 6, toes please. If the "Take your mark" command has been given and then the toes come up, the heat must be asked to stand down while the starter reminds the lane of the rule. Then the long whistle must be repeated. Signaling swimmers to place their feet and the take your mark command is given again. Once again, a starter must keep in mind his primary objective, to ensure a fair start to all. A swimmer shall not be disqualified for an illegal starting position at the start if the race is permitted to proceed. Enforcement of the correct starting position is the responsibility of the starter. The virtue of patience was addressed earlier in this video, but in delivering the take your mark command, starters must be particularly vigilant in enforcing reasonable response times for all competitors. Whether it is product of gamesmanship or nerves, a starter must take into account the various positions and response times of the individual swimmers. But when a response creates a situation of potential distress among the other swimmers, it is a starter's duty to scan the field and then restate the take your mark command. If the problem persists, the heat must be asked to step down while the referee addresses the specific swimmer who should be advised of the consequences if the problem persists. The final issue in our section on response focusing on the starting position. While positions may vary greatly from track starts to a forward lean to dangling arms, one factor must remain constant. Every swimmer must assume a stationary position after the command of take your mark. Only after the starter observes that all swimmers have responded to the command and have settled into a stationary position should the race be allowed to start. Any swimmer starting before the starting signal is given shall be disqualified if the referee independently observes and confirms the starter's observation that a violation occurred. Swimmers remaining on the starting block shall be relieved from their starting positions with a stand-up command and may step off the blocks. The starter shall restart the race upon signal by the referee. If the starting signal has been given before the disqualification is declared, the race shall continue without recall. If the referee independently observes and confirms the starter's observation that a violation occurred, the swimmer or swimmers who have false started shall be notified of the disqualification upon completion of the race. If the recall signal is activated inadvertently, no swimmer shall be charged with a false start, and the starter shall restart the race upon signal by the referee. A swimmer who would otherwise be charged with a false start may be relieved of the charge if the false start was caused by the swimmer's reaction to the stand-up command. It is essential to note that not all motion is considered grounds for disqualification. It is quite common for swimmers to twitch, to tighten muscles, or flinch in a manner that does not alter their stationary position. Again, a starter must be mindful of the nerves present on each platform. Involuntary muscle movements do not indicate a swimmer is leaving their mark. A true false start is any swimmer leaving their mark before the starting signal is given. However, in some cases, swimmers may lose their balance on the platform and fall forward into the water before the signal is given. The starter must instruct the remaining swimmers to stand down. Then the referee and the starter must confer and jointly determine if the swimmer in question truly false started or if the swimmer lost their balance and entered the water without having had the opportunity to assume a starting position. Then no false start should be charged. Previous material should prepare any starter for a wide variety of meet situations. There are additional factors which must be discussed in order to handle unique cases. The first, starting of deaf and hard of hearing athletes. Swimmers with impaired hearing require a visual cue. This can be either a strobe light or the starter's arm signal. If requested by the swimmer, it is at the referee's discretion to reassign lanes within a heat in order for the strobe or arm signal to be more easily visible by the deaf swimmer. When calling the heat to the starting platforms, a starter's raised arm must coincide with the referee's long whistle to notify the start of the next race. Next, The starter must move his arm to shoulder level when he delivers the "take your mark" command. Then, at the exact moment the starter gives the starting signal, he will move his arm to the side of his body to signify the start for the hearing-impaired athlete. Some hearing-impaired swimmers would prefer to focus on the water's surface and wait for the reflection of the strobe as their cue to the start, rather than beginning with a turned head staring at the starter. In these cases, starters must be particularly mindful of induced false starts, as a spectator's camera could easily be mistaken for the strobe. As a starter in this situation, what would you do? If it is determined that a camera's flash was the cause of the false start, the heat must be recalled. Another situation you may encounter as a starter is the occasion when a swimmer needs to start in the water. Be patient, as a disabled swimmer may need help getting into the water. The look of the field at the start will change, and you may have to adjust your position to be able to observe all the swimmers. As we come to the end of the main section of the video, let's review the key points we have covered. Remember that a starter's goal is to ensure that every swimmer receives a fair start. Do your homework ahead of time before the meet starts. Review the rules, know the events, and work with a meet referee. Review the starting procedure before the meet starts. As the first heat steps up, be patient, apply what you have learned, and then let the swimmers swim. We hope this video has given you the tools that you need to become a confident and proficient starter. Now it is up to you to go out and hone your skills. We encourage you to work as many meets as you are able to. There is no substitute for that on-the-job experience. Good luck, and we'll see you on the deck. Up next, a montage of common situations seen in age group meets that will lead to recalled heats. A swimmer slipped at the start, and thus it is not a fair send-off. In large age group meets, there are often two competition courses running simultaneously, a situation that can often produce confusion. In these circumstances, it is the starter's job to advise swimmers to remain away from the water's edge until the other end begins the race. Therefore, no false start is necessary because clearly the young swimmers reacted to the wrong signal. Now for a situational test. One of the lanes had an obviously late start. Does this mean the heat should be recalled? As long as the equipment is working properly, there is no need to recall this heat. The horn is sounded clearly and the other swimmers in the heat have responded. Now lane 5 simply has some catching up to do. In rare cases, as a courtesy, the starter may feel the need to notify the rest of the field that a certain swimmer may be racing at a different pace than the rest of the field for a specific reason. Generally, this occurs when a swimmer is seeking a qualifying time for a shorter distance, and his split in a long race meets that standard. For instance, racing the first 200 meters all out in a 400-meter event. The starter will deliver this courtesy to the other swimmers in order to avoid confusion when one competitor goes out much faster than natural. In these cases, starters, at their discretion, can merely tell the heat before the command to take your mark that a certain lane is attempting an intermediate split. In freestyle events, swimmers are permitted to swim other strokes if they so desire. The referee may permit the swimmer to swim a different stroke. However, he must begin with a forward start, and the time will only count in the freestyle discipline. It is also the referee's responsibility to inform the starter of the situation. There are some situations in which a referee may decide to split a heat. It is up to the referee to determine how the heat is split in order to disrupt the least amount of time. The new heat is then renamed, and the timing system operator must be notified of the situation. The referee then must provide the name to those affected to both the operator and the timers. In very large meets with limited time, flyover starts are often a necessity. It is an effective way to shorten the timeline of the meet. However, safety must be the top concern. Starters must notify all the swimmers before racing begins and stress that after the races they must remain close to the wall and remain in the water until the next heat dives over them. Generally, in flyover situations, the next heat is called to the platform when the slowest swimmer in the current heat turns at the last wall. This way, swimmers will be ready to start as soon as the heat before them concludes. Swimmers will adapt to this situation quickly. However, the starter must stress these keys. The rhythm and timing of each flyover should remain consistent. An obvious sentiment, but one impossible to overemphasize. Always remember the starter's top priority: fair and equitable starts for all.